Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I'm going to be working on a project that I've wanted to work on for a while. It's the Twisted Witch Hat by Crochetverse. And this is a paid pattern. It's a witch's hat, sort of for like Halloween is what I'm planning on wearing it for. Um, so I won't be showing a tutorial. Sorry. Yeah, I put it on. Sorry about that. Um, so I won't be showing a tutorial on how to do this because it's a paid pattern, and I'm not going to show how to do somebody's paid pattern. But one of the techniques that it uses is holding two strands of yarn together, and so I thought that I could show you how to do that if you're interested. Holding two strands of yarn together is a technique that you can use if you don't have the right weight of yarn. For example, this hat is done with two strands of DK weight held together to give sort of like a chunky weight yarn. So the idea is that if you didn't have a chunky weight, or if you wanted to work, like if you really liked a particular DK weight, but you really needed a chunky for a pattern, you could hold two strands next to each other and then crochet with them, and just treat them as one strand. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To get started, though, I'm going to be using this Red Heart Love Metallic, which is black on black. So it's got like a black shiny spot over black yarn. And then I'm going to be using Lion Brand Tweedledee in 3 different colors. So I'm going to start with the pink and move on to the purple, and then move over to the blue. So this will be for the tip of the hat, like the body of the hat, and then the brim. And I'm going to hold those together with the black to sort of darken them up, because these are a little bit brighter than I would like. So I'm going to slide these off to the side, and the first step in this is I'm going to ball this up so that it's a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to make a cake like these. Lion Brand sells the Tweedledee yarns as a cake, but this Red Heart yarn comes as like a traditional skein. So I'm going to drop this down onto the floor, and I'm going to get started winding. Welcome to anybody out there watching. If you have any questions or comments throughout the stream about what I'm working on, or if you just have questions about something that you're working on, throw those in the live chat and we'll discuss those. So I really enjoy taking questions from the audience and anybody out there watching, and just sorry, I'm unwinding this by hand, because if I just drop it on the ground, it's going to knot up on me. I pulled a big chunk out of the center earlier and rewrapped it on the ball. And so I'm just carefully unwinding this so that it doesn't turn into a giant knot for me. But yeah, I really enjoy taking questions from the audience and answering those if I can. So if you're out there and you're watching and you have a question about yarn or crochet, please go ahead and ask those, because like I said, that's sort of why I do this live stream, is because that part is fun for me. So this is my yarn winder. I have a Stanwood yarn winder. It's a pretty heavy duty one. This style yarn winder carries the yarn around, as opposed to one that just spins and lays it down. So it also can make a quite a bit larger ball than a traditional yarn winder. This yarn has all kinds of knots in the center, which is why I pulled that big chunk out earlier. I thought I got most of them. But we'll just see how it goes. My table here is not where I normally wind yarn, because it is a little bit wobbly, so sorry if it's making everybody a little bit seasick to wind this. There are a whole lot of yarn winder options. This one is on the pricier end. I got it as a gift a couple years back. But the $14 option from Amazon worked just fine for me for a long time. And if you're considering getting a winder and a Swift, the cheap plastic options from Amazon are really just fine. I see Stephanie commented hello. Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, sorry about the squeaking and stuff. It's the table. That part will be done. I forgot how loud that this was. I have a,
The water itself is not loud, it's the squeaking.
yeah, the squeaking of the table is the loud part, but, I have a much sturdier table that I normally wind on, but it's not on screen, so, just gonna finish this ball off. It goes rather quickly. At least I think, especially with worsted weight yarn. Fingering weight yarn takes a little while. So you can pull this off, and what I didn't do, and I normally do, is I usually take the label and roll it up and shove it into the center, because I don't normally pull my my yarn balls from the center. I work from the outside generally. And so you can store the label in the center and not have too much problem. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this so that I can get a little bit closer, and then it won't be so squeaky and stuff. So set this aside. I guess the one thing that I should note is that you saw that I just took a clamp off because there's a board. The one thing that I'm not in love with about this Stanwood winder is it has to go on the edge of a table. It can't go in the middle. Because in order to clamp it to the middle of this table, like I am doing, it's facing the wrong direction. So if I wanted to clamp to this table, it has to go this way, and then my yarn has to pull from over here. And so, like, I guess that would be okay if you were working with it, like, on your own table, but for filming and stuff, it's sort of facing the wrong direction and is kind of awkward and uncomfortable for me to go like this. So I would much prefer this direction. And in order to do that, I have to put it on a board and clamp it then to the table. So anyway, so here I have the black yarn and then each of my colored yarns. And so what I'm going to do is hold these together. I'm just going to start with the pink yarn. And I'm going to show you how to do this in just a straight line. The pattern that I'm going to be working calls for working with a magic circle and then working in the round. But just to get us started so that I can show you. Again, I'm not going to be showing how to do the hat pattern, but I can show you the technique for working two together, because that's not something that's unique to this pattern. You can do this for any pattern that calls for it, but you can also do it to substitute yarn. I guess I should stop for a second and talk about how you would figure out how to substitute. So if you look at the yarn that they tell you to use, so let's say, for example, it's a worsted weight yarn. It's, we'll say 220 yards per 100 grams of yarn. So they call for something like a Cascade 220. You would want, if you were going to double the yarn, you would want the yarn that you're doubling to be 440 yards per 100 grams. And then you would hold two together. And that means that when you work those, you'd still have 440 yards if you hold it two together. But you'd effectively have it in half as much weight, if that makes sense. You're gonna use it twice as fast. So if you take two balls that are each 440 and you work them together, you're going to use it twice as fast as if you had just worked it one at a time. So in that case, you would use a yarn that's about 440 to substitute in for that pattern. And you can do this with any sort of combination. Like if you use a worsted and a DK weight, you just figure out what they are per 100 grams, and that's how you would substitute them in. So I hope that makes sense. It might have just been more confusing, but This yarn specifically calls for sort of a light worsted or a DK weight held together. Specifically, they used Lion Brand Mandala Sparkle, which is a DK but on the heavy side of a DK weight. So I'm using a DK weight, which is the Lion Brand Tweedledee, and I've got a worsted here. But this Tweedledee looks like it's on the light side of DK weight. It's pretty fine, so I think the two together will work out pretty well for the pattern. So, let me back up here just a second. So I've got my 2 yarns, I've got my 2 balls laying next to each other, and I'm holding them just right next to each other. And I'm just going to make my slip knot, holding both just right next to each other. And so basically I just have 2 stuck to each other. I'm going to put them both on the hook, tighten up, and then work both just as if they were one strand. And so chaining is relatively straightforward. You hold them together and just work them as if they were one strand. Where it gets a little bit more confusing is when you go to do something like a double crochet. So you can see here, primarily you're seeing the black yarn. It's a little bit difficult. Black yarn's always difficult to see. But primarily you're seeing the black yarn, but here and there the pink is poking through. And on the back side you're seeing more pink and less black. Just the way that I'm holding it. But if I go to make a double crochet, I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to skip the first 2 stitches, and I'm going to insert in here. Figuring out where exactly your yarns are. So instead of inserting my hook under 2 strands, I have 4 strands that I need to get under here. 2 sets of black and pink. And then I'm going to yarn over, pull up, and now it looks like I've got 6 strands on here, but I have to remember to count them each as 1. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. Even though what I'm actually doing is yarning over and pulling through 4, yarning over and pulling through 4. You just sort of ignore that and treat the 2 together as one piece of yarn. And so your biggest problem here is going to be splitting stitches. So it's going to be where you go like this and you didn't quite grab this last loop. You can fix that by just pulling through there. Or by when you go to insert your hook down here, just going through 1, and then you'll create this like weird little loop on the back side. So it's just working with 2 strands held together is really about being careful that you are actually holding both strands together and working through them as if they were one yarn. So I'm going to work just a few rows here so you can sort of see how this yarn looks different when worked together. If you're working with a self-striping yarn, holding 2 strands together can be a little bit of a challenge because you have to get the 2 balls in the same spot. So if you don't want, you have to get them together in the same spot if you want the stripes to be the same as each other. So you can use a self-striping yarn and sort of blend them. If it's a yarn, especially if it's a yarn that doesn't blend very well, you could hold them together just wherever they're at. And so some of the time the yarns might have 2 different colors, and some of the time you might end up working with the same 2 colors next to each other. So that's a possibility. But yeah, if you want the stripes to look the same as each other, meaning if you've got a yarn that goes blue, then red, then pink, you want all of the whole stripe to be blue, and then the whole stripe to be pink or red, and then the whole stripe to be pink together, so that there's not like a variegation to it. In order to do that, you've got to start the balls in the same spot. Some companies sell all of the balls the same way. So if you think of something like a what is the cotton wheel or sugar wheel? I think it's Yarn Bee Sugar Wheel is a color changing yarn. They're all exactly the same. They go from one color to the next, to the next, to the next. And every ball has the same progression. And so those you can just start 2 together and go through, and the stripes will just be heavier. They won't actually be longer. So the only way to get longer stripes would be to work ball 1. You'd work all the gray. For example, if it was gray on the outside, you'd work all the gray, and then you'd work ball 2 and you'd work all of its gray. And then you'd go back to ball 1 and work all of the next color, and then you'd go to ball 2 and work the next color. That's how you'd get longer stripes. But to get heavier stripes, like heavier weight, so I think sugar wheel's like a DK weight. In order to get to like a chunky weight, you'd work them held together. So those are kind of some ways that you can play around with striping yarns. So I'm going to go ahead and just work a couple more rows of this. This is obviously not working towards the hat. That's worked in continuous spirals. Or I guess I shouldn't say continuous spirals. It's worked in the round. Stephanie's asking, what's my favorite DK weight that's readily available at big box stores? It's a good question. I'm trying to think of what's available in DK weight. Yeah, Premier DK Colors is probably the first thing that comes to mind. I really liked working with DK Colors. I don't actually know that it is readily available anymore. At least the Joann fabric that is around here discontinued it. It's certainly easily available online, but they discontinued it in store, I think, just to make room for all of the fall yarns coming in. In the fall, like, Bernat releases all of the Blanket Big and the Blanket Extra and all of the crazy yarns. And so they cleared out a lot of the lighter weight stuff in favor of the heavy stuff. But DK Colors is probably my favorite DK. Joy DK was fine to work with from Michaels. It was a good, solid acrylic yarn. I don't know. There isn't anything like amazing about it, but it was a pretty nice solid, like when I say solid, I mean solid as in it was good quality and did a solid workhorse type of yarn. I don't mean came in solid colors, even though it does come in solids, but it also comes in sort of a color changing yarn. It's not really, I guess it is self-striping. It was more like lots of medium length individual colors. So it definitely wasn't variegated, but I don't know that the color changes were quite long enough to call it striping. I'm trying to remember what exactly DK Colors looked like. It's been a little while since I've worked with it. Trying to think what else as far as DK weight yarns. I'm kind of looking around the room. Must Be Merino may have been a DK. That was actually a really nice yarn from Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby has probably the largest selection of lightweight yarns. Joann Fabric and Michaels tend not to have a very good selection in non-worsted weight yarns, or worsted and larger. So if you want to go lighter than worsted, a lot of times you're stuck in the baby aisle, and that comes in 6 colors. But a lot more companies seem to be releasing DK weight yarns. So that's good news for anybody who likes to work with anything lighter than worsted weight. So, worked a couple rows here, just so you guys can see what this looks like. And I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but hopefully you can see that it's a lot darker because I'm working with the black than just the pink ball by itself. It's a little bit brighter than just straight black. The white in the pink ball is sort of giving an interesting effect here. It's looking very tweedy. And the glitter is sort of making it a little bit shiny there. But hopefully you can sort of see the effect of holding two together. Now, if you're holding two of the same together, obviously this is not the effect you're going to get. But because I'm holding two very different yarns next to each other, you get kind of a interesting tweed look about it. So, my plan is to work this yarn, the pink yarn, to begin with, and then switch to purple, and then switch to the blue. I don't know if I'm going to stick with that plan. I haven't totally flushed the whole idea out, and realistically, I don't know if I'll be able to get it done by Saturday. As a backup, I have a witch's hat coming from Amazon as a sort of other option in case I don't get this done, because it needs to get done and have enough time to block the brim out a little bit so that it's not all wavy. Stephanie's saying she tried Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek recently and really liked it. Check out a few others. Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek, I think, is a direct competitor to Karen's Simply Soft. Or at least that's what their target is. If you feel the yarn and you look at Karen's Simply Soft, I'm pretty sure that's what they're going after. A super, super soft acrylic. The one thing that I would note about Simply Soft, and probably pertains to Soft and Sleek, but maybe doesn't, is that I had a lot of trouble with Simply Soft pilling. So it looks great for things like cowls, and even like fingerless gloves are okay. But I made some leg warmers for some little kids, and they were pilled by like the end of the day. Just because they're sort of a wear and tear type of item. Like they were crawling around and moving around, and they really pilled so fast. But I know lots of people who really, really like Simply Soft, and like I said, I'm pretty sure Soft and Sleek, everything that I'm saying about Simply Soft pertains to Soft and Sleek, but it has a lot of halo to it usually, and that tends to sort of knit itself into little pills, and so that's the only drawback there to that type of yarn. For something like a throw in your house, or something that's not going to get a lot of wear and tear, I think it'll be fine. But for something like a sweater or something like that where you're going to get wear like under your arms and stuff, it might end up pilling more than you'd like it to. So it's the only thing I have to say about that. But otherwise, it feels fantastic, and really it keeps getting softer. It just starts to look a little bit more pilled. So if that doesn't bother you at all, it still is going to feel fantastic. So, I guess I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to work a little bit on this hat. Again, I'm not really going to talk through what I'm doing, but if there's more questions about working two together, or about yarn or crochet or things in general, anytime you want to throw those in the chat, please feel free, and we'll talk about those. So, this project calls for starting with a magic circle, and it has been a very long time since I've made a magic circle, so bear with me a little bit here. So, how has everybody's week been going, and what are you guys working on? So that's always interesting to see what people are working on, and what they've been doing since the last live stream. So, yeah. 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 So, as far as what I've been working on, I finished all of those Harry Potter gifts, and I showed you guys those. I have like 4 rounds left in the in that hat that I was working on. What was the name of that? Roll with Red Heart Roll with It melange. I have like 4 or 5 rounds left in that, and I don't know why I haven't finished it. but that's left on my list of things to work on. And then just decided that I was going to work on this hat a little bit. But other than that, I haven't actually worked on much. I've actually been playing a little bit of Prison Architect, which is a game that I I play for a while, kind of obsessively, and then I don't play for 6 or 8 or 10 months, and then I go back to playing it again. So, it's sort of how I play video games if I play them at all. I play really obsessively for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then not again for months at a time. So, let's see. I bring it's working on knitting a scarf. Tanya says she's working on a corner to corner blanket with brunette blanket yarn. So, those sound like nice fall projects. I don't know about where you guys are at, but it dropped to 40 degrees here today and is pretty cold. So, it was like 90 like 3 weeks ago. So, it's been a pretty fast fall to go from 90 to 40. They're talking snow on Halloween here. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to work in the round holding 2 strands together while talking and doing other things. Yeah, Della's reminding me that I was working on a pillow cover with basket weave pattern. Yeah, that is something that I was working on and probably should pick back up and finish off so that I can make a video on that. And then let's see. I'm not going to attempt the name there, but they say that their power is out. They're new to crochet and making a lap blanket in the back loop. Oh, well, thank you for joining, and sorry that your power is out, but hopefully it'll be back on later and you can catch the sort of the replay of the live stream, because it sounds like yeah, they say that they're gonna watch later to save battery. So, they're asking if I like bamboo yarns. On the whole, bamboo yarns feel very, very nice. The problem with bamboo yarns is generally that they're not really bamboo so much as they are viscose, which is made or derived from bamboo. What they do there is they totally dissolve the cellulose down and then extrude it into viscose. Very similar to modal, rayon, and tencel are all made basically the same way. They extrude cellulose. The problem with it is generally that it has pilling problems. Not always, but it's extremely soft. But again, it has that halo on the outside, and they feel fantastic, but they don't generally hold up fantastic. So I tend to prefer bamboo blends. A lot of times you can get like cotton and bamboo. I'm thinking Haiku makes a yarn called Kobasai, which is cotton bamboo silk. It's Cobasi. And so cotton bamboo silk. And that yarn feels just absolutely amazing. I've made a couple of things out of it. I couldn't tell you how they held up. They were gifts, and I don't know that I've really followed up on them, but I didn't get any particular complaints. But yeah, I think that's generally the biggest complaint that I hear about bamboo is that it feels amazing, but it doesn't hold up very long. So if you're going to make something more accessory-like, it'll probably be fine. If you're going to make something that is going to get some wear and tear, I would be hesitant to invest the time in making something that I know is going to pill pretty badly, or at least has that potential. You could always, if you're worried about it and you have some bamboo yarn, you could always crochet up just a real small square, even something like 2x2, and throw it in the wash machine a couple of times and just see how it comes out. I did that with the Red Heart Heatwave yarn, and I was surprised at how much it didn't pill so much, but it picked up just every like bit of garbage from the wash machine. Like any like little lint that was on my clothes and everything, it just seemed to pick up everything. So, um, yeah, my husband's saying it puffed up. So it did sort of puff a little bit, and it was softer after it had been washed, I think, but it didn't look great. I don't typically machine wash my stuff, but it would be a good test if you're wondering how it's going to pill and how it's going to hold up with like a bunch of it's sort of a good way to get a lot of damage done is running it through the wash machine. So let it beat around with like a load of towels or a load of jeans or something, and um see how it holds up, because that should tell you pretty quickly whether it's going to look nice after a couple of wears or if it's going to be really full of pills and not look so great. So I have some of, I'm trying to think of what the name of it. Lion Brand released a bamboo based yarn. I've got it in green and yellow. I was going to do something with a pineapple, but then I just haven't had the time, and then it sort of stopped being summer. And pineapples in fall don't seem to be as interesting. So, is it called Kobu? Okay. Yeah, so it's Lion Brand Kobu, which is a cotton bamboo blend. So I was hoping that the cotton will help help a little bit, but it may or may not. Cotton isn't known for not pilling either. So meaning cotton is known for pilling. But but yeah. So generally I would say yes, I like bamboo yarns, but be leery, I guess, of some of the known problems. So all right. Like I said, I'm trying to work on this, but I'm finding it pretty difficult to work in the round. It's pretty tight rounds here to start this pattern off. And then additionally, while talking, I might have bitten off a little bit more than I can chew while I'm talking and while I'm crocheting here. So this beginning bit starts with very tight rounds. Worked for a while here, so I'm giving it a go. So again, I'm just working with 2 strands held together though, and really as long as you're being careful not to split your stitches, it's basically the same as working with 1 strand of yarn. And again, if you're interested in finding this pattern or looking what's, looking to see what this is what I'm working on here, it's called the Twisted Witch Hat by Crochetverse. And again, because it's a paid pattern, I'm not showing like a full tutorial or anything here. Just showing you really how to work with 2 strands held together. So, oh, my husband's getting a link to put up so you guys can see what it looks like. So I'm sort of just working tonight on crocheting and taking your questions and seeing what you guys want to talk about. I haven't really done much yarn shopping, and so I don't have a whole lot to show you or unbox for you. Um, and other than that, yeah, unfortunately, so Della's asking about the pumpkin wreath. I really want to do that tutorial, but it sort of got derailed in all of the flooding that we had. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth getting out this year, just because I don't know if people are still interested in doing a pumpkin wreath uh with Halloween on Thursday. There isn't really any way I could get it out by Thursday. But yeah, I guess it's still fall through Thanksgiving. So, I don't know. That might be something that we can still do this year. Like I said, I really have wanted to do that. I got everything ready and filmed it once, and it just we've changed and improved so much in a year that we can't really add to the video that I filmed last year, because it's just substandard, I guess, at this point. Um, so I really have to film the whole tutorial over again. I we can talk about it. I might be able to get it done. If I really worked at it, I could probably get it done this weekend, and maybe we can start editing and get a video out on that so that it could still get out for the fall. So there might be enough interest, and then certainly we can just reshare it again next fall. For those who don't want to make it still this year. So, but yeah, that was high on our list to do, and then with the basement flooding, sort of everything has just gotten so derailed that we just haven't really worked on any of our edited videos almost at all. So I apologize for that. We've been doing live streams, but we haven't put out much in the way of edited videos recently. So, there's also a number of other things that people have asked for that are still on my radar. I haven't forgotten about them, but we just need to get back in the swing of making edited videos. So, what's that?
Just saying, sweet roll.
Oh yeah. My husband's just commenting that the Sweet Roll review should be available soon. Sweet Roll is not a particularly new yarn, but it's one that just seems to hold on in popularity, and I continue to see it available in the stores. So we went ahead and reviewed it anyway. And so that review will be coming out shortly. That might have been the last thing that we filmed before the basement flooded. I don't think we've filmed that since.
There's one other thing. No, not thinking.
There might be one more coming then too. If we filmed a handful of reviews right before the basement flooded, and then
I know there's one for Rio.
yeah,
But we haven't edited it yet.
yeah. Let's see. Tanya's saying, what would I recommend doing with Bernat Velvet? I bought a few balls a few months ago. Had a few rows, but there were so many loose loops I gave up. So right now I'm working with Bernat Crushed Velvet to make a pillow cover. And actually I think it was Della that reminded me that I was working on a basket weave stitch. That seems to be coming along pretty well. The loops look nice enough to me. And I don't know, I think that that's a decent use for it. It comes in a lot of, what do I want to say? Like home decor type colors. A lot of like jewel tones and deeper colors that look nice in your house. So I guess my recommendation might be to hang on for a little longer, and we'll try and get the tutorial on the crushed velvet pillow cover. But if you want to just work on a pillow cover, the basic idea is pick any stitch that you like, make it wide enough to cover your pillow form, and then make 2 of those and whip stitch them around the outside. So you're basically just going to make a big square big enough to cover a pillow form. You can get a pillow form in pretty much any size that you want. It's just basically an uncovered pillow that you can buy at any craft store. And then you just start working on a square that's big enough to cover it. And then you stitch around the outside, you stitch your 2 squares together, and at some point when you stitch like 3/4 of the way around, you shove the pillow in and then stitch it closed, and then you've got a throw pillow.
Can you make a blanket out of velvet or flux or something?
I did a crochet edge border on a Harry Potter blanket about a week ago with Bernat Velux, not Bernat, Lion Brand Velux. Lion Brand Velux is a little bit lighter weight than Bernat Velvet, but I think you could probably still use velvet. It's probably about as big of a yarn as you could possibly use to do a crochet edge blanket with. But that turned out really nice. It looked nice on a crochet edge, so that would be another possibility. I also made a cowl out of velvet. I made a burgundy cowl. I don't know where it's at right this second. I know I have one out of Velux and one out of velvet. My husband can probably grab our review, but you can see, oh, he already did, of the Bernat Velux versus Bernat Velvet. So those are 2 options. I bring it saying that Michaels has a cute heart pillow pattern with baby velvet. Baby velvet is exactly the same yarn as far as I can tell. It just comes in sort of pastel versions. They're kind of interesting colors. The baby velvet doesn't come in really baby colors so much as like pastel versions of jewel tones. So like the mint is more like emerald-y than it is mint. I don't really know how to describe that, but it's they're weird colors. I guess grayer than traditional pastels, but I don't know. I think they're pretty. They're a little bit different. Stephanie's saying she found a cute bunny amigurumi using velvet yarn that she's planning to try. But it's pretty big, about a foot tall. Wow, that is pretty gigantic. I've made some giant amigurumi out of Bernat blanket, and that's often a bit of a challenge. You have to work. Velvet's a little bit more slippery feeling, so it might work a little bit better. But I did a couple of gigantic elephants out of Bernat blanket, and they were brutal on my hands. I made one for my cousin's first baby, and I made another for a charity auction for a friend of a friend. And I did them sort of back to back, and that was brutal. So I guess what I'm saying is I think amigurumi are always a little bit rough on your hands, but with the giant yarns, it seemed like it was just a little bit worse. Though that could be a function of Bernat blanket because it does have such it's got so much friction like between the strands of yarn. Like you really have to like drag it through. Velvet might not have that same problem. I don't remember that being an issue when I was working on the cowl. It's a bit more slippery than the Bernat blanket yarn. So, but yeah, I think cowls are a possibility. I think pillows and things like that are probably a good choice. A bunny amigurumi might be an option, though like I said, it could be that it will be a little bit more brutal on your hands. So, um, trying to think about what else I've seen velvet used for. Um, oh, Stephanie's just commenting with the name of the pattern. I don't think that YouTube chat will allow you to post links. I think only we can post links. So, but my husband found it and he's posting it there. Where would you recommend starting with amigurumi? I haven't made any, but I want to try. I believe that the resource that most people like give as their top resource is a place called Planet June. If I remember correctly, that's where I learned how to do amigurumi. It's really why I got into crochet at all. I had a friend who lived with us and had small kids, and they were really into Frozen when Frozen first came out. And I don't know if any of you had kids when Frozen first came out, but there were no toys available. Disney sort of didn't expect Frozen to be popular at all, and they put like no effort into marketing, or like nothing was available. And then it became like mega popular, and then you couldn't buy like the very, very small amount of stuff that there was. And so one of the first things that I wanted to do with crochet was make some Frozen amigurumi. And there were some free patterns that I found, and the first thing that I did was there's a tutorial on how to just make a sphere. And I think that was one of the first things I did from Planet June. But that was the best resource as far as learning amigurumi. But as far as tips I can give you, you need to work with a smaller hook or much higher tension than you normally would to prevent like stuffing from showing through. There's a variety of other tricks that you can use to prevent your stuffing from showing through. And then I'm trying to think what else I've done. I've used you can use like old nylon stockings and fill those with stuffing instead of putting the stuffing in directly. That'll keep it from poking out. It's a little bit more difficult to keep the stuffing from poking out when you use giant yarns. When you use like a worsted weight yarn, you can get your stitches really tight together. But if you use like a fluffy yarn, it's still pretty difficult to get the stitches to like collapse on themselves enough that there aren't like small holes that the stuffing can poke out of. Trying to think what else as far as amigurumi tips. Oh yeah, so my husband's recommending that you learn to do a magic circle. A magic circle is a technique that you can use so that when you do your top stitches, that you pull it tight and you don't have a hole in the middle. I can pull this out real quick and show you how to do a magic circle here. This is the way I do it. There's about 1,000 different ways to do a magic circle. But the sort of tricky thing about a magic circle, and I don't really know how to explain this, but you're going to try it like 1,000 times and not get it, and then just all of a sudden something is going to click, and then you'll be able to do it forever. And I don't know what happens, but that seems to be the experience that everyone has. So okay, so she knows how to do a magic circle. I'll show real quick just so that anybody else watching who might not know. So what I do is I drape my yarn. There's my tail down here. I drape it over my hand. And then I make an X, like so. Sorry. I'm gonna try and keep my hand on screen here. So I make an X, bring my yarn around and make an X. Put my thumb here. And then you can drop these... Sorry. Drop my fingers out and put my crochet hook in. There's not... we're in a little too tight for me to like get an angle that I can use here. So let me start this over real quick. Try and stay on screen. So I've got my tail end draped here. We're going to wrap around like this and put my crochet hook in. Then I take my working yarn. So that's the yarn attached to my ball. Take my working yarn, come around the back side of my hook, and then drop that down and around my pinky. So now I've got like some sort of crazy knot. You bring your hook and you pull it around like so. And then you bring your working yarn back over the top and pull it through. And when you tighten all of that up, what you're left with is a loop on your hook and then a loop underneath your hook that when you pull on the tail end, So you've got a loop on your hook, and then if you pull on the tail end of the loop under the hook, this loop starts to shrink. So that's the general idea. I know that's not a great tutorial here. I feel like I filmed a tutorial of a magic circle like a long time ago. I don't know if we ever posted it to the channel, but if not, I'll see if I can get that up. For those of you who don't use a magic circle, that's my favorite way of starting anything that you're going to work in the round. So you can make hats like that. You can make amigurumi. I'm trying to think what else starts in the round like that. But anything that you would normally chain for and then... so a lot of times patterns will say chain 4 and then slip stitch into the first pattern to make a ring. Anytime that you're supposed to do that, you can use a magic circle. Unless there's supposed to be a hole in the center. If there's supposed to be a hole, then you don't want to use a magic circle. But rarely do I find that that's the case. So hats, amigurumi, like round washcloths that are worked in a spiral, table runners that work in a spiral, to make like a placemat, like a round placemat, anything like that. You'd want to make a magic circle. And then to work into those, you chain, and then you just... I'm going to flip back here. See if I can show this flat. So I chained 1. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this, but what you do is you work across. So here's my tail that closes my loop. The camera's at a pretty bad angle for me to show this, but so this is the tail that closes my loop. I'm going to block this for a second, but bear with me here. You're going to insert your hook underneath so that you are working across the two. I'm going to move the camera a little bit so that this gets a little bit easier. Normally when I film a tutorial, I shoot over my shoulder. Yeah, a little bit. So here's the two. This is the yarn from my loop and the yarn from my tail. I'm going to insert my hook underneath and drop a loop. And then finish that single crochet. And so I don't know if that's much help, but I'm going to work a couple of single crochets here and show you how this works. And why you would want to do this. So, just real quick here. Okay. So the point of all of this is now I've got some single crochets crocheted around the edge of this circle. If you pull on this tail, the circle disappears, and now they make like a little rosette shape here. You would join this back here, and then you can work in continuous rounds. So, Shalene's suggesting shawls. You can start a number of different shawls. Anything that's like semicircular often will call for starting with a magic circle. So, She's right there. Yeah, a magic circle works there. I will try and get, if I don't already have one on the channel, I will try and get a magic circle tutorial with the camera over my shoulder so that I'm not constantly blocking my own hands and you guys can see what I'm doing. But um yeah, so what my husband's saying is we stopped doing the base tutorials because they're not particularly popular. Um when you do sort of like learn to crochet videos, unless you have a pretty large channel, people just don't see them. So you guys see my live streams and you see my reviews, and those are interesting to people who already know sort of the basics. But to hook somebody in who doesn't actually know how to crochet even a little bit is a little bit more of a challenge getting started because there's just so much out there on YouTube. But if you're going to work on amigurumi or you're going to work on anything that's going to be worked in the round that you don't want to have a hole in it, I really strongly recommend you learn the magic circle. It does take some effort. It's a pretty tricky thing to learn. But once you get it, it will just click. And if my tutorial, once I get it up there, doesn't help, or somebody else's tutorial, if you start there and that's not working, I suggest trying 2 or 3 different places that do it different ways. It seems like everybody has a slightly different way and everyone does it slightly different, but in the end, if you find one that works for you, that's what matters. And I think it makes a project look so much more polished to not have that hole in the center. I've actually been to craft shows where people will be selling handmade crochet hats, and they look very nice. And then you go to look, and they all have a pretty sizable hole in the center. And I always think it's strange that they didn't either learn how to do a magic circle or sew that shut. Like, you can just take yarn and sew the hole shut. So I've seen that a couple of times with different vendors, and I always think that's a strange choice on their part. Or at the very least, cover it with with like a pom pom or something. So I don't know. It feels like that there could be one more step into polishing off your finishing off your projects so that they look a little bit more polished. And that seems like a relatively easy one to change the way you start it or to sew them up. So in the case of amigurumi, though, I definitely would recommend doing magic circle. So a lot of the shapes that you work with are done in the round. They're done very, very tightly, and they're basically all done in continuous spirals so that you get the tightest stitches possible. So yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Shalene recommended an alternate location. I don't recognize that name, but amigurumi to go. But that might be an alternate option on where you could start for amigurumis. But yeah. I bring it's asking how you get rid of seams in the round. I've seen hats with the side seam. So the easiest way to get rid of seams is to work in continuous spirals rather than joining. So usually when you see a seam on a hat, it's because they joined in exactly the same spot every time. So you work around and then you slip stitch, join, chain, and then work another round. So you have 2 options there. You can work in continuous spirals. That works really well if you're going to make a solid hat, but if you're going to stripe it, your stripes are going to have like this weird little stagger, which might actually make it worse. The other thing that I generally do is when you work like a hat, you even if you join, you continue to work in the same direction always. And it seems to get a little bit better if you chain one and turn and work back the other direction. So you'd work this way, then this way, this way, then this way. Where in a hat, you're generally working all the way around. So that's an option.
If you're joining different colors, can you also rotate so that your seam doesn't line up, so you get a seam straight up? Because that's like a 3D printing technique.
Yeah.
You would seam and then you move the seam around so that they don't line up.
Um yeah, so my husband's suggesting from a 3D printing technique, what you can do is if you're going to be changing colors, like you're going to stripe something, you would work the one color and then finish it off. And instead of joining your yarn where you just finished your project off, like rotate it a quarter of a turn and start your project there and then work your round. And then when you go to join the next color, rotate again and start in a completely different spot. That way you don't have a seam that starts in the same spot every time. It wouldn't go straight up the side of the hat. You'd have joins in all different like random locations. Might be a little bit tricky to keep track of, but should work. So that's a technique that they use in 3D printing so that your layers, when they print, you don't want your layer to start in the same spot every time because otherwise you get a seam right up the side. So the nozzle jumps up in different locations so that it doesn't do that. Stephanie's asking, are little amigurumis easier to make because of the yarn and the hook size? It's sort of a balancing act. So teeny tiny amigurumi are difficult, and giant ones are not difficult, but are, I think, more stressful, like on the hands. And you sort of, when you go into it, you don't realize how much tension you have to keep on the yarn just all the time to get nice tight stitches. It's not the same as crocheting like a scarf. It's a lot more stressful on the hands. And it seems like a big amigurumi should work up faster because you're using big yarn, but it ends up being just as many stitches. And so it doesn't really go faster, I guess, is my point. It just gets you a gianter thing. If you could use giant yarn and make like a medium-sized thing, that would probably go faster. But it doesn't really work like that. You have to use giant yarn and get a giant thing, or use medium-sized yarn and get a medium-sized thing. So, I personally would aim for something that is roughly this big. I don't know, like 6-8 inches. Using worsted yarn, something in that ballpark. But even with worsted yarn, you end up using like a 3.5 or 4 millimeter hook in order to get your stitches tight enough. Where generally with worsted yarn, you're using like a 5.5, maybe even a 6 millimeter hook to make like a hat or a scarf or something. So, I personally would start with something medium size that has maybe 3 to probably more than 3, maybe like 5 to 7 parts. So if you consider like a person, where I started was basically an Elsa and Anna amigurumi. So it was a head, a torso, and 4 limbs. So about 6 parts, and then I had to stitch on details for their hair, and they had capes and stuff like that. But generally, like the parts that I had to crochet were like 6 parts. There are other ones where you have to crochet just like tons and tons of little pieces. There's a designer that has a really cute dragon. I think it's called Orbit, the dragon. It's a free pattern, but I think that there are like half a dozen or maybe even a dozen like triangle shaped scales on the back that each have to be crocheted individually, flattened, and then sewn on separately. And that might be a little bit more work than you want to get into to start with. Oh, we posted the link there for Orbit the Dragon. But I think it's a really cool looking pattern, but it's a lot of pieces. It's got ears and it's got the head piece. I think the tail piece is separate. There's like a belly that has to be sewn on. It's a lot of pieces, parts that have to go together. Specifically for Stephanie, there are tons of tiny little guinea pig patterns. So you could start with that. That's basically one tube that you have to make. Getting good at decreases. So when you start, to basically make any ball shape, even if it's a tube, you make a magic circle, you do increases, then you work some amount of the same amount of stitches, and then you have to decrease. Getting good at those decreases is actually, I think, the hardest part of doing amigurumi. You should learn to do an invisible decrease where you only pick up the front loops or the back loops, depending on which side you're crocheting on. So that's a better tutorial. Yeah. Sorry, my husband was pointing out that would be a better tutorial to show. So, doing an invisible decrease so when you normally do a decrease, for single crochet, you pick up your stitches for your first stitch, pick up your stitches for your second stitch, and then you join them together. And what ends up happening is you open those lower stitches up too much and they show stuffing through the bottom. If you only pick up one loop out of each of them, you can pull that a lot tighter and you don't get so much gapping there. You just have to be careful not to create horizontal bars on your project. So you want to do it so that the horizontal bars stay on the inside, and you only pick up the two loops, if that makes sense. So, Beauty and Grace is suggesting the octopi jellyfish, because they're pretty basic. Shalene's saying that sewing's the worst part of amigurumi. I agree wholeheartedly there. There's a little bit of a comment above that. I can see something about miniatures and dollhouses, but the rest of the comments cut off on my...
It says to check out Sharon. She does Where the Gnome Lives.
Okay, so is that Shalene recommending? So Shalene recommended checking out Sharon, who does Where the Gnome Lives, and she does miniatures and dollhouses. And then she said that sewing's the worst part, which I agree. Sewing is the worst part, and you have to get good at like picking your stitches back apart, because you'll inevitably sew something on and it's not where you want it to be. And then you have to pull it back off and re-sew it back on over and over again until you get it in the right position.
And Stephanie also said she was getting the book Crochet Critters by Sarah Zimmerman.
Stephanie said she's getting the book Crochet Critters. That sounds pretty interesting. I don't know if I know that one. I just got a amigurumi book like a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember what it was called. It's upstairs in on the bookcase. The bookcase in the nest. I honestly don't remember what it's called. It could absolutely be Crochet Critters. And then, all right, so I think I'm caught up. So, yeah, the octopi and jellyfish. I really think the octopi and jellyfish are really cute. A while back, I joined a group that was making them for the NICUs. Like, you could make them and send them in, and they would send them to various neonatal intensive care units. So that like they could give them and put them in with the babies. I guess they like to coil their fingers around the like tentacle parts, but the rules and the specifications on those, rightfully so, were very, very strict. So I ended up not doing any of those, but if that's something that you get into, that's an option. Um, Beauty and Grace is also recommending that if you do something with multiple parts, to watch your tension, so that you don't end up with pieces that are vastly different sizes, and that's a good tip. So this is the amigurumi book that I bought most recently. It's called Amigurumi Treasures by Erina Lee. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, but I pre-ordered this a while back because I thought these little guys were super cute. I'm gonna see if I can find a couple of pictures to show you without showing you much pattern. So this side of the book, I don't know what's on camera. We might be too. Oh, there. You can sort of see. There's a cat, an alligator, a mouse. This little deer is super cute. And then this fat little bee with the goggles on top of his head is pretty cute too. Let me see what else is in here. Oh, there's the bee. So there's a little bee in more detail. So I don't know. I thought they were really cute. They're kind of a very specific style. Then there's some that I don't know. This is supposed to be a meerkat. It's cute, but I don't think it particularly looks like a meerkat. I don't know. But it looks more like a puppy or something to me, at least. But this pig is really cute too. So kind of just a chubby little piglet. Yeah. So hopefully you guys can see those. But again, this is called Amigurumi Treasures by Erina Lee. So I picked this up recently. It's a new release. I'm kind of just flipping through this, see if there was anything else that I had to show off here. But I think they make amigurumi roughly the size of like Beanie Babies. And I think they're generally, let's see what the recommendation on yarn is here. They use DMC Natura, Natura, just cotton. 50 grams, 155 meters of fingering weight yarn with a matte finish. I've never heard of that yarn, but it looks like they use a cotton weight, or a cotton fingering weight yarn. So, it looks a bit like they might just use something very similar to like floss. So, I'd have to look up and see the Natura yarn, but I don't know. That's just another option as far as crochet amigurumi books, but I find that there's so many tutorials and free patterns for amigurumi that I have no shortage of options just on Ravelry too. So I really like crochet books, but I tend to end up using patterns from Ravelry more often. I like crochet stitch dictionaries because I don't think there is the equivalent available on Ravelry. I guess you can find projects that are done in particular stitches, but you can't just find like a whole bunch of stitch options all at once outside of a stitch dictionary. So, but yeah, I guess I don't really have much else to talk about tonight. I know we haven't been streaming super long, but yeah, and unless there's other questions about crochet or about yarn or things that you guys want to talk about, that's really all I have tonight. Want to just give you a little bit of update on what I'm working on and show you how to do the working with two stitches or two yarns held together to get a heavier weight equivalent yarn. And that's really about it. I haven't done a whole lot of yarn shopping. Been busy doing family stuff, and I did go to the symphony down here puts on, this is a thing that's going on all around the country, but they do a thing where they show a Harry Potter movie and then they play the entire soundtrack live. And so I went to that last Saturday, and that was very good. And I had a friend in from out of town, and so I didn't do a whole lot of yarn shopping, and I didn't do a whole lot of crocheting this weekend. And so um it's Tuesday, and that means I haven't had a whole lot to show you guys. So um Shalene's saying she got a headless needle but hasn't used it yet. I'm wondering if that was a beetle needle that got auto-corrected. Otherwise I'm not totally sure what a headless needle is, unless I'm misremembering something. But if that's a beetle needle, because I think she was the one that we showed some beading last week, then I'm excited to see what you're making with it. So, yeah. So I think her autocorrect is fighting with her, but yes, it sounds like it's a beetle needle. So yeah, I'll be excited to see what you make from that. And what you think of it. I really like working with a beetle needle over pretty much any other beading technique. I've beaded a few things using them, and they've always turned out the way I like them. I think it's a lot better than pre-stringing beads. So, but yeah. So let me know in a week or so what you think of it and how your beads are going. But yeah, I don't know. Just kind of looking around to see if there's anything that I forgot. My husband's putting up. So if there's ever anything outside of the live stream that you want to ask, so if you've got questions about crochet or any of my videos or yarn in general, anything like that, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. So both of those places you can send me a direct message, and I'm happy to answer questions, anything like that. And I love seeing pictures and projects that you're working on, whether it's something we talked about on stream or whether it's off of one of my videos, or if it's just something totally unrelated and you just want to show me. So please feel free to send me questions and pictures and updates and all of that. One of these days I'm actually going to figure out how Facebook works and get a group together, and hopefully we can sort of build a little bit of a community where we can ask questions and show pictures and whatnot. All of you who get to chat during the live streams can sort of chat throughout the week and show projects and your progress on things, and sort of build a bit of a community around the channel. So that's the idea, but actually navigating Facebook groups from like the creation end is a bit of a nightmare. So once I figure out what I did and how I did it, I will let you guys know where the group is at. So but yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Other than that, I think I'm about ready to wrap up. So if you guys, like I said, if you have any questions, please send them to me on Facebook or Instagram, or just put them in the comment section on any of the videos, including this video after it posts. And other than that, I think we'll wrap up for this week, and I will be back at about 8 o'clock Central Time next week is the plan, and hope to see you all. Have a great night. Oh, sorry about that. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. Bye.